Dr. Judith Amores is a senior researcher at Microsoft Research and a research affiliate at the MIT Media Lab. She's an interdisciplinary scientist working on multisensory technology with research that lies at the intersection of user experience and interaction, engineering, and psychology. She holds a multimedia engineering degree from Universitat Ramon Llull and a PhD in human-computer interaction from the MIT Media Lab. Her PhD work proposed scent as a new type of user interface that can influence a person's cognition, especially when used in a closed-loop fashion with a person's physiological information being fed as input to a computer system. Scent has many advantages over our visual, auditory, or haptic feedback because it can be presented during sleep with a lower chance of awakening the subject, and may be a subtle enough cue to avoid distracting the subject from their primary activity. In short, Dr. Amores is developing smell-o-vision, but for real. After her PhD, she was a research fellow at Massachusetts General Hospital and Harvard Medical School, where she worked on neuromodulation methods to modulate the placebo and nocebo effects, and on deploying the technological interventions she designed during her PhD for health and well-being. Dr. Amores has won numerous research awards and even holds a patent with Jaron Lanier, one of the pioneers of virtual reality. Please help me welcome Judith Amores.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. This is kind of hard to follow. That was an amazing talk. I kind of want to now shift a little bit like our mentality. And I want to talk a lot about how we can actually improve our well-being and our health. Have you ever thought about if we had a piece of technology that could help boost our memory or improve our well-being or just like improve our mood in our daily life? I feel like right now we don't really talk too much about this kind of like experiences in technology. Like imagine that you had a way to help you focus or memorize right now as I'm talking in a presentation, or just help you relax and unwind after work, after a stressful day, or just bring back memories from your past, something really nice experience that you had in your past with your family or your friends. All of these experiences, which actually really is what makes us human, like memories and emotions, is something that I feel we don't really focus too much in human-computer interaction. And part of the reason I believe it's because most of the things that we design are around augmenting the audiovisual senses, and we are multisensory creatures. So if we actually had to do like a representation of how, like a humanoid of how, like the different body parts that we use when we interact with technology, it would probably look something like this. We would only have like a huge eye, only one, right? When we interact with our smartphone, like it's just, you just need like two-dimensional screen. You don't really need a stereo vision or like 3D vision. So one eye would be fine. You would probably have like a huge finger because you're just like, like a thumb, probably index finger or a thumb, right? Interacting with the smartphone, maybe now also like a keyboard. You would have like some sort of ears, but this creature would probably not even have any kind of mouth or nose, right? We don't use the sense of smell or taste in technology. And I think this is a problem because this is actually how we depict like brain function by means of like this sensory homunculus as scientists, right? So in reality, we have a lot of like cortical areas of the body parts that have higher sensory acuity and density and discrimination, for example, around the mouth or the nose. And obviously, we also use our eyes and our kind of like hands, obviously, but we don't really pay too much attention on these other senses. But if you look back at the history, actually, one of the first virtual reality systems ever kind of developed was back in the 60s, and it had like wind, haptics. You could even smell the whole experience, right? And like the first patents, this literally looks like the Daydream, like it just looks like most of the VR headsets that we currently use. But since then, I feel like we haven't really evolved too much like technology. We're still working on perfecting this. We don't really have a good kind of sensorama right now. In fact, if you look into the human-computer interaction research, which is kind of my field of research, it is less than 1% of the papers. And it's not surprising that it wasn't until the 2004 that the Nobel Prize was awarded about how the olfactory receptors work. So we truly have like a superpower. In fact, like we can smell more than like 1 trillion different kinds of smells, and that's several orders of magnitude more than colors or auditory tones. So we truly have literally a superpower that we don't pay attention to it. But the sense of smell is so intimately connected to the memory and our emotions. And I don't have to tell you about it, but you probably remember a particular kind of memory from your past, from your childhood, a particular person. It helps you bring these like really emotional experiences as well. And we also use it every day. We just had lunch, and you literally are able to taste and have all these like sensory modalities because you also have the sense of a smell. So there is like so much work, especially like in neuroscience and psychology, that looks into how smell can, like how humans can smell things like happiness or fear. Like not only dogs do this, we also do it, but we're not so conscious about it. And then Rana before also talked about mimicry, right? Of like vision and auditory, like how we do mimicry with people. But also mimicry is like through the sense of smell. We can even smell the emotions of the other person and then also kind of be empathetic and reflect on that. So it's truly like remarkable that as humans we do this. And there is also so much work on how we can use the sense of a smell to change the pain tolerance, to also like change the content of the dreams. It's another interesting modality. Improve your sleep. So what grandma used to say, like just have some lavender in your bed. Actually, that really works. What it's also amazing, and it's also this touch on the ethics part of it, is how it is an interesting modality to use overnight. So in this study, they shown how only one night of olfactory reversive conditioning significantly reduces cigarette smoking behavior. So these are people that usually smoke cigarettes, and just one night, like you go to sleep basically in stage 2, and they also did different conditions, stage 2 and REM sleep. They release the scent of a cigarette, so you bring that memory. And then right after that, they have an awful kind of smell, like imagine rotten fish or something like that. And what they found is that when doing this kind of typical Pavlovian conditioning, but overnight, people significantly like reduce the number of cigarettes smoked just one night. So this is kind of like pretty crazy. So what to me was fascinating is that the sense of a smell is intimately connected to the memory and the emotional pulse of the brain, as I mentioned, the amygdala and the hippocampus. And I'm not here like to talk to many neuroscientists that probably know about it, but just briefly, when you first smell something, like lavender, let's say, these kind of like molecules are like first processed by the olfactory bulbs. And the olfactory bulbs are intimately connected to these brain areas, which is like, it is different from the other senses, which are rooted through the thalamus, like taste and like vision and hearing, like all of those are rooted through the thalamus. So this might be why smell, more than the other senses, is so successful at triggering emotions and memories. And also why it's interesting is to use this also overnight, because it's less likely to wake you up. And actually that's why we have the fire alarms, because people just go to sleep, then there's fire, you don't even like realize you don't smell it, and it's actually dangerous. And there's like some smells that activate the trigeminal nerve. So basically when you eat like spicy food and things like that, or like peppermint, you know, you have that actual sensation, the physical sensation, that it's more like touch. So those kind of smells can actually wake you up. And there's been some work on using this also in virtual reality to give you like that haptic sensation only using scent. So just to summarize, the sense of smell is perhaps one of the most pervasive and like primal senses that we have, but it's not really used in human-computer interaction. So what I've looked into is how can we use smell as an implicit output, as a computing output, and then using physiological signals as an implicit input to these computing systems. So a lot of the work that I do is on how can we use this for well-being and memory. So my work is a lot about improving health and enhancing our cognition during wakefulness and sleep. So I create these closed-loop systems, basically looking into how physiological information like heart rate, respiration, brain activity can be fed back to virtual or augmented reality systems, or also scent wearables, not only like Fitbit, but think about how can we use wearables also with a scent modality, and then feeding this back and releasing and changing the audio visuals based on this information, and always giving agency to the user so they can change the intensity, the frequency, and the rules that they prefer. So for example, if your heart rate goes over certain threshold, then you can release scent so you are more aware of it. Also activating it overnight in specific sleep stages, which you can control. So over the years, I worked on different prototypes, 3D printing, from manufacturing, everything. Some devices are basically like necklaces that connect to physiological sensors like brain activity to release a burst of scent in specific sleep stages. Some others monitor cardiorespiratory information using accelerometer. So you can predict that just by wearing the device. Some others are used overnight, so we've done some user studies conducting this while people are sleeping at home, and some other more exploratory designs are integrated with kind of piercings or on-face wearables. And obviously, many of them are integrated with virtual reality experiences. Some of the things that we've explored are particularly focused on well-being applications, so where you can release a scent during the day and reactivate that same scent overnight. To not only improve your sleep, but also kind of trying to reactivate that emotional state that you had during the day. So virtual reality, as you might know, has been explored very widely for many therapeutic and well-being applications, for post-traumatic stress disorder, for phobias and pain. But then when it comes to applications that really relate to emotional memories, or also spatial navigation, anything that has to do with space also, the sense of smell is super important, as I mentioned before, because of the amygdala and the hippocampus. Amygdala related to emotions, hippocampus is all about spatial navigation and memory. So it is crucial that we look into integrating the sense of smell for these type of applications, especially thinking about therapeutic applications and health. So we did some pilot studies looking into how we could potentially promote relaxation using virtual reality, these olfactory interfaces and a wearable EEG. And we found that overall, this was actually surprising because some people might perceive that they are relaxed, but actually you don't really see a physiological response. But in here, we saw that with only 5 minutes, people actually, we saw a correlation and very similar with subjective and brain activity responses associated to relaxation. So this was, again, it's just a kind of a preliminary study, but it's interesting to think how to integrate different sensory modalities to maximize that relaxation effect. And more recently, we published a paper, this was about a month ago or so at CAE, which is like the HCI main kind of venue, where we apply this technique. Many of you maybe probably know, it's called targeted memory reactivation, which basically you associate particular stimuli during the day while you're learning something. So let's say another or a particular audio, and then you reactivate that same stimuli overnight. And there's been some studies where we actually compare different sleep stages. It's very, very beneficial when you do it during slow wave sleep, so during deep sleep. So you reactivate that same scent overnight or to that specific sleep stage, and you do the recall just to see if people actually improve. So think about it like Pavlovian conditioning kind of, but then also overnight. So in this case, we conducted a study where most of these studies are conducted in research laboratories. Polysomnography is kind of the state of the art for sleep studies. People stay there is a clinical staff, a nurse also looking into looking into the sleep staging and kind of labeling it, and then manually releasing the scent, which are huge olfactometers. This is literally from the previous study that I've shown, the cigarette study. So they use nasal masks because you really need a very, very controlled way to release scent. And yeah, it's super big and it's noisy, so you have to place it in an adjacent room. So this is what is state of the art. And what we've worked on is actually using machine learning to do automatic sleep staging. So you kind of help the clinical staff. Also using less electrodes, trying to minimize the number of electrodes, so you could potentially use this at home. So this is actually was a within subject study, 32 participants. They took the device home. They used the wearable during the day. You can use it just as a necklace, as a brooch, and you personalize the frequency and the intensity of the scent. And you use this during a learning task. We also monitor physiology using Fitbit and Hepatica. And you can also just like trigger it at particular sleep stages. For this study, we had people walking around the room. This is kind of related to the memory palace technique, but imagine in a physical space. So basically, people have to walk around and they have to memorize about 10 different locations, and there's like 2 objects per location. There is like the word in English and the translation in Spanish. And yeah, they just go around, they have the scent, and then that same day they go home and you reactivate that same scent overnight. And then we do the test and the recall. That's 1 week. Then the following week we do the control condition, which basically they don't have the smell, and then we randomize all of this. So some of the results that we found is that actually we see a significant improvement when you compare the control condition where participants did not have the smell, the days that didn't have the smell, and then in comparison to actually wearing the device with the scent condition, and also after sleep. So obviously we know that sleep is really good for memory consolidation, especially slow wave sleep. But what is interesting is that you can boost this effect also when you reactivate that same scent. And then for the translation, the results are actually pretty similar as well. And in this case, it's mostly like the interaction effect is not as high as in the previous one. What is interesting is that we also conducted a 2-dimensional kind of memory task where they had these card locations, but instead of having it in the physical space, they just memorized them in a 2D grid. And they have to remember the column and kind of like the row. And in this case, we did not see a significant improvement. In fact, people, after sleep the following day, they remembered less. And this might be because this task was too difficult for them. It was just like literally 5 minutes. They had to remember like all of this. So we did not see an improvement. So obviously, if you didn't learn anything that day, you won't remember anything the following. And then what is kind of remarkable is that 1 to 3 weeks after, we see an improvement. People still remember more when they were in the scent condition. And we're talking about just 1 night. So this effect is like, it's still affecting up to 3 weeks later, which is crazy. And this doesn't happen with the memorization, with the translation though. So there is a really kind of like a significant effect when we're talking about spatial navigation tasks. And this is all related to like what I mentioned before about the hippocampus. We did like also looked into different physiological signals, and we saw an improvement also, a reduction in the heart rate. And this is all related to kind of like the previous work that we also see a significant improvement in the deep sleep. So this is all basically saying that we can use scent overnight, especially this is a lavender kind of based scent, which increases slow wave activity, and it's related to deep sleep. So we see a significance, and also the perceived sleep quality also improves. And this is kind of also well known. The subjective relaxation also increased. So in summary, the idea is that scent and scent wearables can be used for memory consolidation in spatial navigation, cognitive, sensory motor tasks, and this effect lasts for at least 1 week. We saw an increase in deep sleep and sleep quality, and then an increase in relaxation and reduced workload. And all these experiences, this is just an example of one study. I envision to do, obviously, augmented reality, right? That's all kind of my work in the past. Didn't really talk too much about it, but instead of using these physical cards, we can totally do this in mixed reality. And particularly what I find very fascinating is that if we can do this also for emotion, can you actually reactivate an emotional state? So this is kind of connects with this project, which is called the Lotus. In this case, we created this Lotus flower that can release scent based on your physiological information. It detects your heart rate and your respiration just by holding it in your hands. And then we're also monitoring brainwave activity. This is, again, super kind of like noisy device. This is also based on the music EEG. But to create these kind of experiences that are in real time changing the virtual environment, in this case, it opens the Lotus flower and maps this kind of like real time brain state, specifically for focus or relaxation. It's a decent device that you can use to kind of build these type of interactive experiences. And basically you can couple interactive virtual reality experiences like associating this lotus flower, opening the flower, and then associate with a particular scent. So the idea is that every time that you smell that, you can go back to that relaxing state or that moment of, like, for example, if you're practicing meditation, can you associate that so you can go back to that moment of calmness? We're also conducting some clinical deployment. This is an area that I'm really, really passionate about, and trying to transfer these type of technologies from the research labs to actually healthcare. So we're collaborating with many doctors and therapists in different regions. This is a study that is ongoing, and it's a collaboration with the psychotherapy department at the University of Lübeck. And we are doing this type of like kind of targeted memory activation, particularly for maladaptive memories. So we're trying to look into if we could do this for therapy. So basically, when you go into therapy and you're doing an imagery rescripting, imagine you want to change that maladaptive memory. You release the scent, and then you reactivate the same scent overnight. And a lot of these traumatic experiences are obviously very unconscious, and some people might not even want to talk about it. So how can you make it subtle, that it's pleasant, that the patient, or like the participant always consents, and to make it really like a new way of thinking about, a new way of thinking to help these like therapies. We're also doing an ongoing clinical trial. This is the Massachusetts General Hospital. And we're investigating how to use virtual reality with biofeedback and also scent to help patients cope with pain and anxiety. And also sleep. As I mentioned before, like a lot of these patients suffer so much, like poor sleep. You are in the hospital, you don't really sleep well, so can we actually help them? And this is based on an experience that we built in the past, we presented at SIGGRAPH, where basically, just gonna play the video, people are immersed in this underwater virtual reality experience. We're also monitoring brain activity and using the Empatica to monitor heart rate. And you see these jellyfishes that are flickering at half of your real heart rate. You also hear the sound of your heart, but at half the heart rate. The scenario gets darker as you're more relaxed. And yeah, the whole idea is to kind of like very slowly help you like to reduce a relaxing state. So it's in a way thinking about biofeedback, but not so kind of like explicit. And overall, this is just like 100 people testing it there at SIGGRAPH. People felt very relaxed, but we did not test this in the clinical context. So that's what we are doing right now. In this study, in this clinical trial, where participants are wearing the virtual reality headset, also brain activity, we monitor their physiology also with Empatica, and they are also using the scent wearable. So we associate this virtual reality experience with the same scent, and then when they go to sleep, we reactivate that same scent. So this is the typical pipeline or timeline of a patient that goes into surgery. These are patients that have like some sort of cancer. Most of them have lung cancer, and they before they go to the surgery, they have to do some physical exams, and after the surgery, they stay at the hospital for at least 3 days. And during that time, it is crazy because they don't really have anything else beyond just using their smartphone. That's really what they have, or they watch maybe TV. So they are bored, and also they have so much anxiety. I've seen so many people, like, obviously they have pain. It is like a difficult moment to deal with, right? And not only them, like also, not only the patients, but the families. So how can you help them in these specific cases? And this is when we're actually using the intervention. So we are doing this virtual reality and olfactory interface kind of experience in the morning, in the evening, and then we reactivate that same scent overnight. And to finalize, this is a collaboration with MIT and the Barcelona Children's Hospital, and we're using also this for kids that are about to also have some sort of therapy.
Hola, amiga. ¿Cómo estás hoy? ¿Quieres ir a dar una vuelta?
We're actually using Affectiva. I don't know if Rana is around, but yeah, and this is the scent wearable.
¿Qué tal si probamos las respiraciones mágicas? Te ayudaré. Inspiramos y expiramos. Inspiramos y expiramos. Huele como a caramelo, ¿verdad? Inspiremos y expiremos juntos. Vamos a dar una vuelta con música. A ver cómo eres de valiente. Veo que te sientes mejor. Pulsa el botón y verás qué pasa luego. Te encuentras mal porque tus células no están bien. El doctor te va a pinchar células buenas para luchar contra las malas. Cuando tengas las células buenas en tu cuerpo, hará que las malas se vayan corriendo. Será menos de 1 minuto, solo un pinchazo. Eres valiente y puedes aguantarlo, ¿verdad?
Sí, sé que puedo.
¡Vale! Te noto súper valiente. Vamos a soplar, a ver qué magia puedes hacer. Déjame hacerte una foto, valiente. Sonríe. 1, 2, 3.
And this is obviously a good moment to talk about ethics. To conclude, this is a lot of things that I would love to talk today, and I'm always thinking about this: how can we give agency to users, to participants, to all these people that use this type of technology when you're interacting with an implicit system, right? How can you make it an explicit interaction? How can you give them really agency so they feel empowered, especially populations like children, right? How can you deal with that? If you do design interventions for sleep or using physiology or emotion regulation, I believe it has to be in collaboration with doctors and ethics experts, because otherwise, I mean, I think the more the merrier, and the more interdisciplinary we are, the better to really tackle this. Another thing that I believe it's important is, if we can, I think ideally we would like to run the machine learning models on device versus on the cloud. And I think also we should design more guidelines for assessing and trying to minimize these motion recognition applications. To deal with the ethics, we have to design more guidelines and really trying to think about how can we minimize the risks and maximize these benefits. So just to conclude, I believe that the key to unleash the full potential of technology, particularly when we think about mixed reality, because it's not only about a VR headset, right? I think we have to explore new applications and these platforms that are designed for health and insight. So after you have worn this device, you can go home and still have some sort of like insight that you can take away, that you learned something, that it improved your memory, that it improved your well-being, and that instead of replacing our reality, they actually enhance it and they make us better. They make us better humans. And for that, I think we have to go beyond on-screen time and beyond only focusing on audiovisual senses. And that's for it. Yeah, thank you.
You talked about lavender
Yeah.
under the pillow, sleep at night. I know mugwort is also used under the pillow to help with lucid dreaming.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, with your sleep studies, were there any occurrences, especially people who were receiving the scent, any occurrences of lucid dreaming?
Yeah, that's an area I'm super excited about. And part of the reason why I got interested in smell, it was actually for the reason of lucid dreaming. So because to me, it's like lucid dreaming is our own virtual reality, right? You are completely immersed. It's just like the dream. It's perfect. So I actually experimented with mugwort, like I did. And for these cases, there's studies also that show how, for example, lavender or rose changes the emotional content of dreams. So that is an area that I'm also interested. For the Lotus scent, the main idea was actually if you're mindful during the day, you are going to be mindful at night, ideally. So you train yourself to be aware of your reality, and then you do that also overnight. So that was kind of like the inspiration, because if you're, I wanted to see if actually overnight, but just still like I have to explore it more, but that's definitely an area I'm super excited. Yeah.